All right. Sorry. Hi, everybody. And so here we are for our first session of CHY 116 of the semester. This is obviously not the way that anybody would have wanted to start, both with just sort of the general remote start for USM, and then the circumstances in my own life, namely having to stay home with my toddler son because he was a close contact at daycare, forcing me to really go with the asynchronous delivery for this session as well, rather than meeting live, which would have been my preference. But as we're going to see this semester, I think more so than we have even since the pandemic started, life is going to get in the way of what we planned quite often. And so I hope that you are understanding. I do apologize for the way this had to play out, but I hope that you'll just be patient and understanding just as much as I will be with you when inevitably life is going to get in your way as well. And we'll talk about how we're going to sort of deal with that throughout the semester as well. And so, like I said, we are starting with these asynchronous videos. This first one I'm sending out is really just the course introduction, talking everything that I would normally be talking about if we were meeting live, about just how 116 is going to work and how we're going to do things. And so let's start off just by taking a look at the course website, which I did send a link out to in the email with the link to this video. So you have the link to this website. This will be sort of our central hub, just like those of you that were in 114, same way that we use 114, that website for that course. We'll be posting a lot of things on this 116 site as well. And so if we start to take just a look at the things that you're going to need this semester and so forth, once we do end up actually in the lab live, obviously safety goggles and safety glasses will once again be a definite requirement. For those of you that have been here, you already have some. And if you don't, then you can certainly purchase the ones through eCampus that we offer. Or if you just go onto Amazon or Home Depot, Lowe's, get any sort of safety goggles or safety glasses that are quote unquote safety rated, and you'll be fine. I mean, anything that is going to protect your eyes. You do need the 116 lab manual. Looks like this. And you do need the current edition, which is the 3rd edition. That can also be purchased through eCampus. If you have not done so, please do so immediately. You are going to need that very soon. eCampus, I think if I remember right, they say 3 to 5 days delivery, but it wasn't, I don't think they ever hit that even before the supply chain issues hit. And so order it immediately so that you can have it if you haven't done so already. You will need some sort of spreadsheet software. The preferred would be Microsoft Excel downloaded right to your computer. Note that if you go to this site right here on the website, this is the university offering of a free version of the full Office suite that you can have. If you do go through this, if you don't have it already, and you do need to go through this free university offered package, just make sure to note that when you go through this, you'll essentially have 2 different options for Excel. One of those will be just a web-based browser version of Excel. Do not use that one. That does not have the full functionality that you are going to need this semester. Instead, you want to download Excel to your actual computer. That will have everything that you need. You are welcome to use Google Sheets if you would like as well. Google Sheets in general, just it definitely isn't as robust as Excel is. Excel, if you're planning on going on in science and STEM in general, Excel would definitely be your better bet. And so I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with Excel rather than Google Sheets. But if you are really familiar with Google Sheets and that's what you prefer to use, you'll be okay there too. Be aware though that as far as my own expertise goes, I am definitely much more well-versed in Microsoft Excel, and I will be able to give you assistance with Excel issues you run into. Google Sheets, I'll probably be able to help, but we may run into things there that I just don't know with Google Sheets that I do know with Excel. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. A couple other things just to note on this page before we just sort of talk about the syllabus and whatnot. You will see our lab schedule right here. And so everything that just our schedule for the semester, what labs we are doing that week. And so for instance, here we are in week 1, the week of January 24th. And you can see what we're doing is talking about the policies, expectations, and so forth. That's what I'm doing right now in this video. The next video will be talking about the actual lab that we are doing this week, the kinetics of fading indicators. You'll always see material due. I'm not too worried about the pre-lab for this first lab. If you completed some of that, if you found it, completed it, great. If not, don't worry about that. I'm not going to hold that against you for this first week of lab. But this is where you will see any of the pre-lab and post-labs that are due for the week as well. So for instance, next week, when we hopefully are back live, the week of January 31st, the lab we are doing is the kinetics of the clock reaction, part 1. What is due is all of your post-lab from the first lab, from the kinetics of fading indicators. And also you see that week, all of your pre-lab assignment is due as well. Sorry, a little hiccup in the video as I had to pause it there for a second. But so using that schedule, you'll be able to always tell when things are due and what lab we are actually performing. The other thing, you'll find the instructor schedule on here. Not much that you might have to use that for, but if you do have to miss a lab for some reason and you want to try to make one up in another section, that might be possible. You would have to contact that other instructor to see if they even have room, and they might not. A lot of labs are full. And if they do have room, if they would let you in or not, and then that's up to instructor discretion. So hopefully that won't happen, but if that is something that needs to occur, then you would find the other instructors here. You'll also find, so these instructor pages are where we each individually might post things that are related to our specific class. So for instance, if you go to mine, you'll see here all of just my contact information and my office hours listed here, as well as any class data. So anytime that we are collecting data and we're going to use class data for our post-lab analysis, you'll find all that posted right here. None up there yet because we haven't done anything. The other thing that you will find is any emails that I send out to you. You'll be able to come here under the announcements and find those as well. So you'll be able to see those later. Syllabus we'll come back and talk about in just a second. You'll find a number of other things on here, different Excel tutorials. So the Excel tutorial that was included in your CHY 114 manual is here as well for a nice general Excel overview that you might want to go back and refresh yourself on. You'll also find one that's going to come in very handy for our first lab, which is plotting several different graphs onto, or several different plots onto one Excel graph. And so that's something that might come in handy. And then just a number of other resources here for you on the website, safety data sheets, which you'll need for your some of your pre-lab work for every lab. You'll be able to find all that chemical information right here. So let's jump into talking about the syllabus a little bit. So this is a general syllabus for the course, but it's no different than, I'm not doing anything different than what is in the syllabus. We talked about what you need, your goggles, your lab manual, and so forth. Calculator, pretty obvious, your spreadsheet software. You actually aren't going to really need access to a printer for me this semester. We're going to talk about this, but you are going to turn in everything electronically via Google Classroom. And so you're not going to need to actually print out any of your graphs or your spreadsheets. So you're not going to really need to worry about that. And so the lab itself, once we do get in and are able to actually be in the lab and working, every lab is going to have a pre-lab session, just like those of you who were here for 114, same idea. So we're going to have a pre-lab session where I'll talk about just anything sort of class related that I need to, and then talk about the science and what we're going to be doing that lab period. Those pre-labs typically anywhere from average probably half hour to 45 minutes or so. And then you're going to jump in and do the lab. And so as far as your grade, we simplify things a little bit in 116. And so in 114, you had your final paper that you did, you had your lab practical, so you had your conclusion that you were doing every week, and a few other things in there. It's a little bit simpler for this semester. There's no paper, there's no practical. You're basically just graded on what you do every week, week in and week out. And so, so how are you doing every week? And are you doing your analyses correctly? Are you doing your lab notebooks? You'll see we put a lot more emphasis on the notebooks this semester. 40% of your grade is dictated by your lab notebook, 20% by your pre-lab, and then the other 40% is dictated by your PostLab. Let's just touch on those things just a little bit. And so your pre-lab, hopefully you have your lab manual in front of you. And so let's just look at a couple things in there real quick. And so similar to 114, your pre-lab is going to be based on two basic parts. You're going to have pre-lab questions. And so for instance, for this week, and again, don't worry if you didn't have this, but ideally in an ideal world, what you would have had this week were the pre-lab questions that were on page, where are they? Yeah, some pre-lab questions that were on page 6, and actually there weren't really a lot of pre-lab questions with that one. If we look ahead, for instance, to experiment 2, yeah, and with some of these, there aren't a lot of real pre-lab questions, a couple of them. And so you'll have to look through the manual for each lab to see if there are actual pre-lab questions. But the other part is that you need to start your lab notebook. Before you ever come to lab, your notebook needs to be set up and ready to go with several different parts. And for those, if you really take a look at, so in the beginning of your lab manual, starting on page Roman numeral 9, it just discusses how you want to set up your lab notebook in general. And you'll see a lot of that pre-lab work right there, again, on Roman numeral page 9. About halfway down, pre-lab work, title of the experiment. What are we actually going to be doing? What's the objective of the experiment? Why are we doing it? What are we looking for? Any pertinent equations and calculations, a list of chemicals and equipment. That's where those SDS sheets are going to come in handy when you're doing your chemical list. You'll need to be coming on to using these sheets to find the pertinent safety information. Yeah, so if you just sort of continue to look through that section of the manual with the lab notebook, you'll get an idea for what you need to be doing for your pre-lab work every week. And then you're actually in lab. And so your pre-lab work is done, you come to lab, I talk about what I need to talk about, you start to do the experiment. As you're doing the experiment, you're keeping your lab notebook, writing down everything that you are doing, everything that is being done in general, what you're seeing, what your data is. And you'll notice that your lab manual for this course does come with, towards the back, sort of the typical lab notebook carbonless copy pages. And so you'll note that when you write on it, that it will copy through to the page underneath, which is why, and we'll point this out a little bit more when we're actually in lab and you're working, but that's what this fold out sheet is for, by the way. So you can use this. So if I'm writing right here on page 5, if you can see that, there we go, writing on there on page 5. And what I'm going to do, so underneath is the copy of page 5. So here's the page I'm going to write on. There's the copy of page 5. And so I'm going to put this divider underneath there, so that when I write onto this, everything is automatically copied onto this page. Now, if you were actually turning in physical copies this semester, what you would do is tear out the, tear out whichever one is perforated, but you'd tear one of them out, and that's what you would actually hand in. And that's pretty typical for a student lab notebook, that you would be making copies as you go, so you can turn in the copy to your instructor. But again, we'll talk about how you're going to turn things in a little bit differently this semester, but I did just want to show you how the lab notebook itself works. And then the rest of your grade, all based on the PostLab. And so your spreadsheets that you're turning in, your graphing, whatever you have to do, all of your different PostLab questions and analysis and so forth. Let's see, what else in the syllabus do we really need to talk about here? Lab safety, when we actually get into the lab. And again, most of you have been here already, so you know the drill. Safety goggles and glasses have to always be worn. Proper lab attire, closed-toed shoes, no sandals and so forth. Must wear long pants, no shorts, that whole deal. Usually not an issue towards the beginning of the spring semester, but when the weather warms up, sometimes people forget and wear shorts. I'm absolutely a stickler on that. Come late April, we get a nice bright 65-degree day. You come in my lab wearing shorts, I will send you home. You won't be able to stay in lab. So I guess I won't send you home, but you can't stay in my lab. And so remember, just keep that in mind when the weather does start to get warmer. Absolutely no food or drink in class and in the lab at any time. If you, especially since our meeting is at 12:30, I understand it's right around lunchtime. If you do need to poke out into the hall, have a drink, eat an apple, whatever you need to do, that's absolutely fine. I have no issues with that. You'll see me do that from time to time. It just can't be done in the lab at all. Attendance. So the general attendance policy is that you can't miss more than 2 labs or you will fail the lab. And also, if you do miss a lab, that you can obtain the data from another student for a maximum of 75% of the points. Now, that is still technically the policy, but obviously we are in a different situation now. And so sort of the COVID addendum to the attendance policy is, I mean, you very well might test positive and have to stay home, or be a close contact and have to stay home. And I'm certainly not going to be holding that against you. Even if you just feel ill and you haven't had a test, stay home. I do not want you in lab if you are feeling ill. Sort of, especially now with the more virulent Omicron creeping around. If you're feeling sick, I don't want you in my lab. That is for your health. It's for the health of your classmates. It's for the health of myself. With an unvaccinated, nearly 2-year-old toddler at home, I'm trying to protect him as well as I can. And so if you feel sick, I don't want you coming to lab. And like I said, I obviously will not be holding that against you. And so if you do have to miss lab because of any of those reasons, just get in touch with me, email me. For the purposes of this policy, I'm going to consider you absent. If you just flat out miss lab and you don't get in touch with me whatsoever, that's a miss lab. And it would count towards this policy. If you get in touch with me, you're going to be all set. And in those situations, we have provisions that will allow you to complete the lab as best as you can. Basically, we would be using the resources that we used when we ran this lab completely remotely last spring. And so the biggest thing, just get in touch with me and we'll be able to work things out and go from there. Read through the rest of this. There's some basic sort of university just policies and whatnot in there that you'll want to look through. I guess the other big thing to just talk about as far as general course information, like I mentioned, you're not going to turn in any physical paper copies of anything to me this semester. I started using Google Classroom really when the pandemic hit into swing, and I found that I like it. Even when things hopefully do return to relatively normal sometime in the future, I'm probably going to stick with this as far as submissions. It's just so much easier, honestly, on my end, without having to carry stacks of labs everywhere. And frankly, it's not that difficult on your end either. And I heard, and I'm not just saying that because I am. I got feedback from a lot of students when I was doing this and asked them how much of a pain it was. And most of them said, it's really not that bad. And so we are going to use Google Classroom. Hopefully you have seen the link already. And so hopefully you got the link and were able to sign up for the class. If you haven't, send me a message and I will get that back out to you. But everything that you turn in is going to be via Google Classroom. This is basically what it looks like for you. And so what you would do, for instance, for the first lab, kinetics of fading indicators, you've got your notebook and your post lab that you'll have to turn in. You just go to notebook, view assignment, and then simply as add or create, and you're going to upload your files there. Now, it does not matter to me how you get this into an electronic form that you're going to be able to submit. Whether you scan this and get an electronic file that way, take a good picture of it, take a picture of it with your phone. That's fine, as long as it's a readable image that I'm able to use, whatever works for you. The other thing that you can do is, those of you that have smartphones, which is probably the vast majority of you, I know there's definitely a good app on in the App Store for iPhones, but there is a Google Classroom app where you'll be able to log into your class right by Google Classroom, go through this same thing, add or create, and you'll be able to, add or create and take a picture right there with it. And I think Google Classroom actually has a scan option, and it would scan and upload your file right there for you. Pretty quick and easy, to be honest with you. It's really not that bad. And so you'll be able to submit everything that way. For the only thing to really definitely keep in mind is, for instance, when you're submitting your post-lab work, you're going to have your post-lab questions. So for instance, for the first lab, our kinetics of fading indicators lab, you'll have your post-lab questions that are, and I'm just taking a look to see what page they're on, just for reference. Yeah, so various post-lab questions on page 7 and 8. And so you're gonna have those in the manual. And so same thing, however you want to get that into an electronic form and submit it, that's fine. You are also going to have your Excel spreadsheets and graphs. I do not want you to send me your Excel file. What I want you to do is take an image of the graphs or the spreadsheet and send that to me instead. And so for instance, when we pull up, so this is part of one that I was working on for your first lab. And so for instance, this is one of the graphs that was created for it. And so rather than submitting your whole entire sheet to me, excuse me, sorry. What I want you to do is to screenshot the pertinent pieces and send those. If you don't know how to screenshot, literally just Google it. And again, that'll depend on what platform you're using. But you can see, for instance, if I want to screenshot from a Mac, screenshot on Mac. Google it, and it's going to tell you what to do. And it'll, in fact, tell you there's a couple of, if you look at this one, a few different options for how you're going to take screenshots. Honestly, with a Mac, if you're using a Mac, I usually use Shift-Command-4. You can see what that does. And so Shift-Command-4. Oh, there we go. Gives me my little cursor. Drag it here. And then boom. I have a screenshot. It just went over onto my other monitor. But now I have a screenshot image file of that graph. Save that, and that's what you would actually submit, rather than giving me your entire Excel sheet. I don't want your entire Excel workbook. I want the pertinent pieces, especially with some of these labs. They're going to have, like, there's all of this data that you're going to be using and working with for your first, for your first experiment. I don't need necessarily all of this raw data. Some of this is important. I mean, it's all important because you're using it to generate your results and your conclusion, but I don't necessarily need to see that. And so you'll need to figure out in some cases, what are the important pieces, what are the important graphs, and only screenshot those. Just like if you were turning things in by paper, you would print out your graph and give it to me. Same kind of idea. And so that's pretty much Google Classroom. And so that there are a few advantages. One, like I said, it's a big advantage on my part to not have to carry everything around. I can upload everything right onto my iPad. I write on the iPad just as if it were paper. And you get back sometimes faster as well. So I can get it back to you right when I do it. And it just returns to you and you're able to see it. Google Classroom will track your grade for you. So you'll always have an idea of where you stand as far as your grade for the course. And it also just definitely gives both of us a record of when things were turned in. It's another way for you to see your due dates. So your due dates, like I mentioned, you'll always be able to see those on your schedule. What is due when? So all of your when things are due. You'll also be able to see it right on Google Classroom. As you can see here, your experiment 1, the kinetics, your notebook, and your post lab due February 3rd by 12:30. The pre-lab for experiment 2, the kinetics clock reaction, pre-lab due February 3rd by 12:30. Same as when your post lab is due for experiment 1. Experiment 2 notebook and post lab due February 17th by 12:30. That's a 2-week lab. So you get a little bit of time on that one. We'll talk about that when we get there. But that's just another way for you to keep track of when things are due as well, is just by going to Google Classroom. I just don't have the due dates in for the rest of them yet. I'll get there when I have time. I've just put it in the first few for now, so you'll see them. But you'll be able to see when things are due. I think that is about it as far as the course in general and how things are going to go. And so hopefully we will be back live during the second week and be able to hit things with a good live lab for experiment 2, the kinetics lab. I will be sending out another video with all of our pre-lab information and everything that you need to know for experiment 1. I just thought it was a little easier to separate the videos into one video sort of for overall course intro and another video that pertains to the actual lab itself that we're going to be doing. And so that is it for general course information. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks for watching.